Welcome, and today we're going to talk about triggers and how that affects not only our well-being but the well-being of others. What exactly that means. When people get upset, they talk about what they're upset about. But too little attention is paid to how we get upset. There are behavioral cues that we either see or hear that make us feel a certain way. Be the expression in the eyes, perhaps the movement in the mouth. Could be the sound of the voice that sounds like a certain kind of emotion, angry or upset, fearful. And in those moments, that is a trigger into a strong feeling. And those feelings are very subjective. What it is we make meaning out of for each of us is often different. And from that, we often build the narrative or the meaning, the stories, and we certainly have beliefs about what certain behavior means. There's a biochemistry that goes with all of this. And most or some know about cortisol, and almost everybody knows about adrenaline. And that adrenaline reaction that happens when in that moment we're triggered. And it is either explosive in the way that we express ourselves to other people, or implosive, where we have strong feelings within, but it doesn't necessarily come out as anything that we say, but we certainly feel it in the most intense way. Now, this response, most people have heard of as fight or flight, and you can think of it as a threat response. And when that threat response is fired off in literally a split second, we are not going to think very clearly. While one person often wants to deal with those situations later, the other person most often wants to deal with it right now. And therein lies a conflict that is very difficult to get around. And it's a universal conflict. It's not really male or female, but it is one person's on one side of later and the other person's on the other side of now. And it feels very intense. Now, learning to take a break during these times is thwarted or stopped because of one person's need to settle it right now. And in that need, more and more of that threat response is firing off, more and more adrenaline's firing off, less and less thinking is happening, and more hurtful things are being said. And this is fertile ground for the potential for even more extreme reactions. But in the end, we're trying to meet our needs, ironically, through this conflict. And in one sense, it becomes a tug of war. My needs, your needs, now, later. And in some sense, the tolerance for emotional closeness underlies all of this. And each of us has our own comfort zone in this regard. And so we battle with each other, not fully understanding what the fight is really all about. But in the end, if you can and your partner can learn to take a break, having the trust that you will return later if you're the one who likes to take the break now, and that partner trusting you to do that, because the complaint often is that if I take a break now, you're never going to talk about it again. And in fact, that holds a lot of truth, that is what happens, because the person that's avoiding wants to avoid that very uncomfortable reaction that goes on, all the hurtful things that are being said and sometimes done. And it's so unfortunate, because this is the source from which relationships are eroded away from the standpoint of our affection or affectionate feelings for the other person. So in order to get something called a timeout or taking a break kind of strategy in place, it really requires a commitment that is something more than a technique. That is, if you say you're coming back to deal with whatever it is you're taking a break from and you don't, that's not really a technique. That's a commitment. And while it might be uncomfortable in the beginning to learn to return to deal with stuff, it's a commitment that makes the whole process of calming communication down in such a way that you really don't need a third party called a professional or a mentor of some kind to help you navigate or negotiate relationship challenges. When we're negotiating for our own needs, there's a thing that happens where one person says, "This is what I need. I need more time to do this," or "I need you to treat me in a certain way." And the response to that is, "Well, I need you to treat me in a certain way," or "I need this kind of time." And that is a sure formula for getting nowhere, and a reemergence into that escalation called fight or flight, that threat response, fueled by adrenaline, in which you will be driving down that road of hurt feelings and cleaning up messes of things that you said or did that afterward you regret. So commitment to return also means a commitment to be able to take a break. And sometimes people think that this technique is like, I take a break, I come back, and somehow we're going to have a therapy session. And that is absolutely not the way it works. You can come back for a few minutes, 5 minutes. At most, you'll have 15 minutes to discuss what it is that bothers you and what you're seeking from the other person. However, you've got to learn to be flexible, kind of be able to think on your feet, and to be willing to take a break as often as you need rather than what you think you should be doing. One of the roadblocks, or an additional roadblock that comes up in couples communication or communication with somebody that you're very close to, is, "But, in the past you did this. And what are we going to do about that? And now I'm worried or fearful that this is going to happen again." Or, "I just don't trust you." And when you think about it, relationships really are based on the currency of trust. And so if we aren't showing up for the other person in a very consistent way, not a perfect way, not 100% way, that is a land that does not exist in the reality of human relationship. But a good batting average of showing up for that person that we declare we love and care about, that is the goal. So the point of time-limited conflict, if you will, has everything to do with physiology. And the whole point is this: when we trigger ourselves into this reactivity, we aren't thinking clearly. And if we're not thinking clearly, we aren't going to solve problems. It's really not that people need some kind of expert in between them to help them solve problems. Problem solving has everything to do with our calmness. And with calmness comes the clarity of thought. And the whole point about how much time we can spend interacting in conflict is really tied to that. That if we can't keep ourselves relatively calm, the conversation, the discussion, the interaction, the argument turns into something else. And by the time you're done, you're both out in left field with hurt feelings, having said things to your loved one that you regret saying. And it has a lot to do with this reactivity, with its source being adrenaline. There's a topic that many people know about called boundaries, or otherwise known as limit setting. So when we're negotiating our needs with somebody, particularly somebody we care about, we have to set limits around what we can do and what we can't do, what we say yes to and what we say no to. And inside this, there can be a difficulty of ensuring that we meet our own needs. And there are many people on the planet that feel compelled to take care of other people's needs at the expense of themselves. And so the idea of self-care, while it's an interesting idea, and most people agree it's a good idea, it's a very difficult one to put into action, to make happen some practical, healthy way for ourselves. And for those who must take care of other people at the expense of themselves, oftentimes there's this difficulty with feeling guilty even when you want to take care of yourself in the smallest of ways. And yet if we don't, we get overwhelmed, and when we get overwhelmed, so much goes by the wayside. Quality of our relationships, our efficiency in the way that we take care of everyday responsibilities, our motivation. And it leads to things like feeling depressed, and maybe we participate in worrying, thinking about the future in very anxious ways. So what does it take to make a commitment to yourself? And how do you move past this? And if we circle back to the topic of triggers, triggers are one of the things that sets us back from doing the kinds of things that are important to take care of our own needs. How is it that you stand up for yourself in a way that allows you to be healthy, to be happy? And if you really think about it, when you are happy and healthy, you take care of others in a much more high quality way. And that alone could be worth what it takes to stand up in such a way that you become the protector of yourself, taking care of your needs, really for ways of being able to give to others in such a way that it is that idea of a win-win, where both parties come out feeling better about the whole circumstance. Yet, sort of at ground zero, or where that rubber meets the road, it still takes the ability to tell people, no, I'm not going to do that now. And so, you will, if you have been in the habit of taking care of others, find that people push back. You can say no all day long. And that doesn't mean that they won't push back, and even harder, and make complaints perhaps that you're even selfish. And in a heartbeat, you can feel that sense of guilt. And if you go down that path over and over and live a life where you feel overwhelmed and you are stressed, you will pay a price, whether it's the price of addiction, the price of some sort of breakdown, the price of motivation. It is not a free ride. So what I think is really important for all of us to learn and to make a commitment to is the very thing of taking care of our needs, particularly when people are pushing back, when people are complaining. If you come from a position of understanding that this is essential for your well-being, it's completely reasonable, then it's time to stand up and tell people, not in a necessarily negative way, but certainly a firm way, that you are not available for any particular request or time period when you know it's time to refuel, to rejuvenate, and to make sure that you are going to be able to sustain the kind of love and care that you provide to those around you, and most importantly, to yourself, so that you can continue this path of living the life that is most meaningful as a mother, as a father, as an artist, as an athlete, as someone who helps others, as somebody who builds something, designs something. Be the very best you can be in the way that you want to leave a mark and a legacy here on planet Earth. So I want you to learn to take care of yourself so that you can be the best you can be, the best you. Making a commitment to take the time to take care of yourself. And even though there are these obstacles called triggers, or the difficulty with setting boundaries or limits, I want you to commit to taking care of yourself. And think about it. Breathing practices, movement, what you eat, who you relate to, who you have relationships with, how you manage your time, and most importantly, the time you take for yourself to have fun, excitement, relaxation, with comfort, safety, and security, to love yourself so that when you love others, you are the best you can be.